The way you start your morning decides your life.
Before the world asks anything of you, before noise floods your mind and urgency pretends to be importance, there is a quiet moment each morning where your life is decided again. Not by fate, not by luck, but by the discipline you choose before the day chooses you. Most people sleep through this moment even while awake. The Stoics did not. They understood something modern life has made easy to forget. The morning is not a beginning, it is a test. And how you meet it determines the quality of every hour that follows. When Marcus Aurelius wrote to himself at dawn, he did not speak of motivation or inspiration. He reminded himself that difficulty was inevitable, that people would be selfish, arrogant, ungrateful, and loud. He prepared his mind not to control the world, but to govern himself within it. This is where discipline truly begins. Not with productivity, not with habits, but with the internal decision to remain sovereign over your own mind. Morning discipline is not about doing more. It is about becoming less reactive, less scattered, less owned by impulses you did not choose. You wake up each day with a mind that has already been shaped by yesterday. Unfinished thoughts, quiet resentments, subtle fears and expectations carried over like dust on your skin. If you rush into the day without cleansing the mind, you allow yesterday's weaknesses to rule today's actions. The Stoics knew that the first victory of the day must be internal, before you speak, before you consume, before you react. The morning is the only time when the world has not yet fully claimed you. That is why it is sacred. Discipline in the Stoic sense is not harshness. It is clarity. It is knowing what belongs to you and what does not. Your alarm rings. That moment is already a fork in the road. One path is comfort disguised as rest. The other is effort disguised as resistance. The body will always vote for comfort. The mind, unless trained, would justify it. Stoicism teaches you not to argue with impulses, but to observe them. You notice the urge to delay, to scroll, to drift. And you remind yourself gently but firmly, this moment will not return. What you practice now, you practice all day. The modern mind is overstimulated before it is stabilized. Notifications arrive before intention. Opinions arrive before principles. This is why focus feels rare and discipline feels exhausting. You are trying to control the day after surrendering the first hour. The Stoic morning reverses this. It begins with withdrawal, not engagement. With silence, not input. You do not rush to feel good. You prepare to act well. Epictetus taught that it is not events that disturb us, but our judgments about them. In the morning, your judgments are most malleable. This is when you can remind yourself that nothing external can damage your character unless you allow it. That praise does not add value. That criticism does not remove it. That today will contain frustration, delay, and temptation, and none of these require your surrender. When this understanding is placed early in the mind, it becomes armor rather than theory. The reason most people fail at discipline is not lack of willpower, it is lack of identity. They try to act disciplined without seeing themselves as disciplined. The Stoic morning is where identity is reinforced through repetition. You do not say you will be calm today. You act calmly before the chaos arrives. You do not promise focus. You practice it in stillness. This is how the mind is rewired, not through affirmations shouted into noise, but through quiet consistency practiced in solitude. There is something deeply uncomfortable about an undistracted morning. Silence exposes the mind. Thoughts surface that have been numbed by constant stimulation. This is why many avoid it. But the Stoic does not fear inner confrontation. He welcomes it as training. If you cannot sit with your own thoughts at dawn, you will be ruled by them at noon. Morning discipline is not about perfection. It is about familiarity with your inner world so it no longer surprises you. Self-control is not suppression. It is alignment. When you rise with intention, you align your actions with your values before temptation introduces alternatives. You remember what kind of person you are committed to being. Not in abstract terms, but in practical ones. a person who responds instead of reacts, a person who does not outsource their mood to circumstances, a person who understands that mastery is quiet and progress is often invisible. The Stoics believed that every day is a complete life in miniature. How you begin reflects how you will endure. The morning is where you decide whether you will live deliberately or drift unconsciously. Most drift, not because they want to, but because they never pause long enough to choose otherwise. Discipline is simply the habit of choosing again and again, even when the choice is small and unobserved. This is why morning discipline rewires the mind. It shifts authority inward. It teaches you that you do not need ideal conditions to act with virtue. You need only awareness and commitment. Over time, the mind learns that calm is not accidental, focus is not fragile, control is not oppressive. They are practiced states, strengthened daily, most powerfully when no one is watching. As this discipline becomes familiar, you will notice something subtle but profound. The day begins to feel slower, not because time has changed, but because you are no longer chasing it. You move with intention rather than urgency. You respond with principle rather than impulse. And it all traces back to that first quiet decision each morning to take command of what is yours to command. This is not about 2026 as a year on a calendar. It is about the moment you decide that your mind will no longer be shaped accidentally. That discipline will not be something you force later in the day, but something you establish before the day even begins. The Stoics did not wait to be tested before preparing. They trained in advance, and the morning was always their first training ground. Discipline is not proven by waking early alone. It is proven by how you direct your mind once it is awake. The Stoics warned that an unguarded mind, even in silence, can still wander into weakness. So the second layer of morning discipline is not physical at all. It is mental positioning. When you wake, your mind immediately starts negotiating. It replays worries. It anticipates conflict. It reaches for comfort. This is not failure. This is human nature. Marcus Aurelius never scolded himself for these thoughts. He corrected them. He understood that the first thoughts of the day are not commands, they are invitations. Discipline begins when you choose which invitations you accept. Most people allow their first thoughts to define their emotional state. A memory creates irritation. A plan creates anxiety. A comparison creates dissatisfaction. By the time they leave their bed, they are already internally compromised. The Stoic morning interrupts this chain. It teaches you to observe thoughts without obedience. You do not fight them. You do not follow them. You let them pass like weather. This is where mindset is forged, not through positive thinking, but through accurate thinking. The Stoic asks, is this thought useful? Is it within my control? Does it strengthen my character? If the answer is no, the thought is released, not suppressed. Released. Over time, the mind learns efficiency. It stops clinging to what does not serve action or virtue. One of the most powerful Stoic practices is premeditatio malorum, the calm anticipation of difficulty. In the morning, this is not pessimism. It is realism. You remind yourself that today will contain disrespect, delay, temptation, fatigue, not to dread them, but to remove their power to shock you. What surprises you controls you. What you expect, you manage. When you calmly acknowledge that obstacles will appear, you stop demanding a smooth day. And when you stop demanding ease, frustration loses its grip. Most anger is born from violated expectations. The Stoic morning dissolves unrealistic expectations before they harden into resentment. You are not entitled to comfort. You are committed to virtue. That single shift changes everything. This mental preparation also sharpens focus. Focus is not concentration alone. It is the ability to return attention to what matters after distraction. In the morning, when the mind is fresh, you practice choosing one thing to hold lightly but deliberately, not a to-do list. A principle, patience, courage, restraint, purpose. This principle becomes the lens through which the day is experienced. Modern discipline culture obsesses over optimization. Stoicism obsesses over alignment. You do not need to control every minute. You need to control your responses. The morning is where this truth is installed. You rehearse how you will speak when challenged, how you will move when tired, how you will decide when tempted. This rehearsal is quiet, internal, and incredibly powerful. Self-awareness deepens here. You begin to notice patterns, the same fears that appear each morning, the same excuses, the same mental shortcuts. Instead of judging yourself, you study yourself. The Stoics believed self-knowledge was the root of self-command. You cannot govern a mind you do not understand. Morning discipline turns you into both student and teacher of your own inner world. There is also humility in this practice. Each morning reminds you that mastery is never finished, that yesterday's discipline does not guarantee today's clarity. This prevents arrogance. You do not assume strength. You rebuild it daily. Like sharpening a blade, the work is repetitive, unglamorous, and essential. As days accumulate, something subtle shifts. You stop needing external motivation to behave well. You stop relying on mood. Discipline becomes default, not effortful. The mind, having been trained to orient itself each morning, begins to do so automatically. You are no longer constantly correcting yourself. You are guiding yourself. This is how the mind is rewired, not through force, but through daily orientation. Each morning you remind yourself who you are, what matters, and what does not. You enter the day already anchored, already prepared, already awake in the truest sense. And when challenges arrive, as they always do, you recognize them not as interruptions, but as confirmation, proof that your preparation was necessary. Proof that discipline is not something you perform when life is calm, but something you establish so you can remain calm when life is not. This is the second truth of morning discipline. You do not wait for the day to shape you. You shape yourself before the day arrives. Space between stimulus and response. Space between impulse and action. This space is where self-control lives. Without it, even the strongest intentions collapse under pressure. The Stoics understood that self-control is not suppression. It is clarity. When you wake and immediately consume noise, messages, headlines, other people's urgency, you surrender that clarity before the day even starts. Your mind becomes reactive, not directive. The disciplined morning protects the mind from early invasion, not because the world is evil, but because the mind is impressionable. Epictetus warned that impressions arrive uninvited, but consent is optional. In the morning, you practice withholding consent. A thought says, check your phone. You notice it. You don't obey it. This is not deprivation. This is training. Every time you delay an impulse, you strengthen the muscle that governs all future impulses. Focus, restraint, patience, all of them depend on this same muscle. Most people believe discipline is about adding effort. Stoicism teaches that discipline is about removing weakness. You remove unnecessary decisions. You remove early temptations. You remove mental clutter. The result is not rigidity but freedom. A mind that is not constantly pulled can finally choose where to go. This is why the Stoic morning is quiet. Silence is not empty, it is instructive. In silence, you hear how often your mind demands distraction. You hear the urge to escape discomfort, and instead of running from these urges, you sit with them. This is where self-control becomes real, not in dramatic moments, but in these small, private refusals. As you sit, you begin to see how emotions actually form. Anger does not appear fully grown. It starts as irritation. Anxiety starts as anticipation. Desire starts as a suggestion. When you catch these early, they are manageable. When you ignore them, they harden. The morning is the earliest checkpoint you will get all day. This awareness rewires your relationship with emotion. You stop fearing it. You stop being ruled by it. You see emotions as signals, not commands. The Stoics never tried to become emotionless. They aimed to become unenslaved. And that freedom begins by noticing emotion before it takes over. There is also a moral dimension here. Self-control is not only about productivity, it is about character. How you speak to others, how you respond to disrespect, how you behave when no one is watching. These are not decided in the heat of the moment. They are decided in advance. The morning is where you pre-commit to your standards. When you remind yourself of your values early, you are less likely to betray them later. Not because you are forcing yourself, but because you have already chosen who you intend to be. This is why Stoics emphasized intention over outcome. You cannot control how others behave today. You can control how prepared you are to respond well. As this practice deepens, you will notice something unexpected. Urges lose urgency. Distractions lose intensity. The mind, having learned that not every impulse is obeyed, begins to quiet itself. Focus becomes less of a struggle and more of a state you return to naturally. This is not mystical. It is neurological. Repeated non-reaction rewires attention. But the Stoics understood this long before neuroscience gave it a name. They knew that the soul becomes shaped by what it repeatedly practices. A mind trained in the morning becomes a mind capable of restraint in the afternoon and dignity in the evening. Self-control also creates self-respect. Each morning you keep a small promise to yourself, you reinforce trust. And self-trust is the foundation of confidence, not loud confidence, quiet confidence, the kind that does not need validation because it is built on consistency. By now, the discipline is no longer just a routine. It is becoming an identity. You are someone who pauses, someone who chooses, someone who does not rush into reaction. This identity follows you into the day, shaping interactions, decisions, and even failures. Because you will still fail sometimes. Stoicism does not promise perfection. It promises recovery. And the morning discipline ensures that when you slip, you notice quickly, correct calmly, and continue without self-hatred. This is the third truth of morning discipline. Self-control is not a heroic act performed once. It is a quiet practice repeated daily, until composure becomes your default and impulse becomes optional. Up to this point, you have been preparing the mind, creating space, and strengthening self-control. Now the focus shifts inward, toward identity, because the Stoics understood a hard truth. Behavior follows identity, not the other way around. Most people wake up asking, what do I have to do today? The Stoic wakes up asking, who must I be today? This question changes everything. When identity is clear, decisions simplify. When identity is vague, the mind negotiates constantly. The morning discipline is the time when you define yourself before the world tries to define you. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself each morning that he would meet people who are rude, selfish, ungrateful, and unthinking. But he did not say this with bitterness. He said it with clarity. He knew that his identity as a rational, disciplined human being did not depend on how others behaved. It depended on how faithfully he lived according to reason and virtue. This is where self-awareness matures. You stop measuring your worth by comfort, praise, or outcome. You measure it by alignment. Did I act with restraint? Did I speak with integrity? Did I remain steady under pressure? These are questions you rehearse in the morning, not judge in the evening. Identity-based discipline removes friction. You no longer ask whether you feel like being patient. A patient person is patient. You no longer debate whether to act with discipline. A disciplined person acts with discipline. The morning is where this identity is refreshed, because identity, like strength, fades if it is not maintained. There is also an important detachment that forms here. When you define yourself by character instead of results, success and failure lose their emotional extremes. Praise does not inflate you. Criticism does not break you. You are grounded in something internal and stable. This is one of Stoicism's greatest gifts, unshakable in orientation. The morning discipline becomes a mirror. You see yourself honestly, without excuses, without cruelty. You acknowledge your weaknesses not as flaws to hide, but as areas to train. The Stoics believed that shame was useless but responsibility was essential. You do not punish yourself for imperfection. You prepare yourself to respond better next time. This practice also reshapes ambition. You stop chasing external validation and start pursuing internal excellence. Your goals become expressions of character rather than attempts to fill insecurity. Work becomes meaningful not because it is admired, but because it is done with care and discipline. As this identity strengthens, something subtle but powerful happens. You stop feeling rushed. Urgency fades because you are no longer trying to prove yourself. You act deliberately. You move with intention. The world may remain chaotic, but you are no longer internally chaotic. This is especially important in the modern age, where attention is constantly pulled and identity is constantly compared. The Stoic morning acts as a shield. Before you scroll, before you consume, before you react, you remind yourself of who you are and what you value. This prevents you from outsourcing your self-worth to algorithms and opinions. There is courage in this. It takes courage to live by principle in a world that rewards impulse. It takes courage to be calm when outrage is encouraged. The morning discipline builds this courage quietly, day by day, without spectacle. By now, the discipline is no longer fragile, it is rooted. Even when mornings are rushed, even when conditions are imperfect, the identity holds. You know how to return to center quickly. You know what matters, you know what does not. This is the fourth truth of morning discipline. When you define yourself by character before the day begins, the day loses its power to define you. It is no longer only about control or identity. It is about direction. A disciplined mind without direction becomes rigid. A Stoic mind is disciplined towards something, growth, virtue, and contribution. The Stoics believe that every human being has a role to play, not assigned by status but by nature, to act with reason, to improve oneself, to serve the larger whole through right action. The morning is when you consciously reconnect with this role. Without this reminder, life becomes a series of reactions instead of a coherent path. Most people drift because they do not choose a direction each day, they let urgency decide for them. The morning discipline reverses this. You do not plan every step, but you choose the aim. You decide what kind of effort today deserves, what kind of struggle is worth accepting, what kind of distraction is beneath you. This is where purpose sharpens focus. When you know why you are enduring discomfort, discomfort loses its threat. Fatigue becomes meaningful. Delay becomes tolerable. Even boredom becomes training. The Stoics did not romanticize hardship, but they respected its role in strengthening character. In the morning, you quietly remind yourself that growth is not convenient, that discipline will often feel unrewarded in the short term, that the world does not owe you recognition for doing what is right. This reminder is not depressing. It is liberating. It frees you from the need for constant external affirmation. Purpose also reframes success. You stop asking, "Did I win?" and start asking, "Did I act well?" This shift reduces anxiety and increases consistency. You are no longer dependent on circumstances to feel satisfied. Your satisfaction comes from alignment with your values. At this stage, the morning discipline becomes deeply personal. You begin to see how your strengths can be used in service, not just self-improvement. Patience makes you a better listener. Self-control makes you reliable. Focus makes your work meaningful. Stoicism was never about retreating from the world. It was about showing up to it with excellence. There is also acceptance here. You accept your limitations without resignation. You accept that some goals will take years, that some efforts will never be visible, that some days will feel stagnant. This acceptance prevents burnout. You are playing a long game, measured in decades, not days. As purpose clarifies, so does resilience. When setbacks occur, they are no longer interpreted as personal failures. They are data, feedback, part of the process. The morning discipline trains you to respond to setbacks with curiosity instead of self-pity. You also become more selective. Not everything deserves your energy. Not every argument deserves your response. Not every opportunity deserves your attention. Purpose acts as a filter. This conserves mental resources and protects focus. By now, discipline feels less like restriction and more like alignment. You are not forcing yourself to behave well. You are allowing yourself to live in accordance with what matters most to you. This creates a quiet confidence that others may notice, even if they cannot explain it. This is the fifth truth of morning discipline. Discipline without purpose is endurance, but discipline with purpose is transformation. This is intentional, because discipline that only works in calm conditions is not discipline at all. The Stoics never trained for ideal days. They trained for pressure. And this part is about preparing the mind to remain steady when the day inevitably pushes back. By now you understand that mornings shape the mind, but the real test of that shaping happens later when plans break, people disappoint you, fatigue sets in, and emotions rise. The Stoic morning does not try to eliminate these moments. It prepares you to meet them without losing yourself. One of the greatest Stoic insights is this: events do not disturb us, our judgments about them do. In the morning, this idea is abstract. During the day, it becomes painfully real. Someone speaks disrespectfully. Something goes wrong. Your effort is ignored. These moments arrive suddenly, and without preparation, they pull you into reaction. Part 6 is about building emotional endurance before the emotions arrive. In the morning, you rehearse loss of control, not as fear, but as inevitability. You remind yourself that frustration, irritation, and temptation will appear. And you decide in advance that their arrival does not give them authority. This decision is subtle but powerful. It creates a pause where most people have none. This pause is where Stoic strength lies. When irritation appears, you notice it forming. You feel the tightening, the heat, the urge to respond. And instead of obeying it, you observe it. You let it exist without feeding it. This is not weakness. This is mastery. You are no longer fighting emotion, and you are no longer submitting to it. You are governing it. The Stoics believed that emotions lose intensity when they are clearly seen. In the morning, you train this clarity. During the day, you apply it. Over time, emotional spikes become shorter. Recovery becomes faster. You still feel, but you do not spiral. This is especially important in a modern world designed to provoke. Outrage, comparison, urgency, they are everywhere. Without discipline, your nervous system lives in constant reaction. The Stoic morning resets the baseline. You enter the day calmer than the world expects you to be. There is also compassion in this part, not just for others, but for yourself. You stop expecting perfect composure. You stop turning every emotional response into a moral failure. Instead, you treat setbacks as training moments. Each time you regain composure, even after losing it briefly, you reinforce control. Resilience is not about never breaking. It is about breaking less deeply and recovering more quickly. By now, you may notice that external chaos feels less personal. Problems still exist, but they no longer define your internal state. You begin to experience a rare freedom, the ability to be fully engaged in life without being emotionally hijacked by it. This freedom changes how you relate to people. You listen more. You react less. You respond with intention instead of impulse. Conflicts lose their sharpness because you are no longer trying to defend your ego in every exchange. The morning discipline also teaches you endurance in discomfort. You stop running from boredom, silence, and effort. You stop needing constant stimulation. This makes long-term focus possible. Deep work, deep relationships, deep growth. At this stage, discipline becomes protective. It shields your energy. It preserves your clarity. It keeps you from wasting your life reacting to noise. This is the sixth truth of morning. Discipline. You do not practice discipline to avoid difficulty. You practice it so difficulty cannot control you. This is the phase the Stoics valued most, because it marks the transition from practice to character. You are no longer constantly reminding yourself to be composed. Composure begins to arise on its own. This does not mean life has become easier. It means you have become steadier. The Stoics described this state as inner firmness, not emotional numbness, not detachment from life, but a grounded presence that is difficult to disturb. You still experience pressure, conflict, and uncertainty, but they no longer shake your foundation. The morning discipline has quietly rewired how you interpret the world. By now, you notice that your reactions have slowed. There is less urgency in your emotions, less need to immediately explain, justify, or defend yourself. This is not passivity. It is confidence rooted in self-trust. You know who you are because you have reaffirmed it every morning. This stability changes how you handle success as well. Praise no longer intoxicates you. Achievement no longer defines you. You enjoy progress without clinging to it. You accept recognition without depending on it. The Stoics warned that success can be as destabilizing as failure if it is not held lightly. Another quiet transformation occurs here. Your attention becomes durable. Focus is no longer something you chase. It is something you protect. You are less tempted by distraction because you no longer need it to escape discomfort. You can remain with a task, a conversation, or a challenge longer than before. This alone puts you ahead in a world addicted to interruption. Relationships also shift. People sense your calm. Some are drawn to it. Some are unsettled by it. You no longer need to mirror other people's emotions to feel connected. You can be present without absorbing chaos. This allows you to be supportive without being drained. The morning discipline has also softened your inner dialogue. Where there was once harsh judgment, there is now firmness without cruelty. You correct yourself without self-contempt. You hold standards without self-hate. The Stoics believed that self-respect grows from consistency, not perfection. By now, that respect is forming. You also begin to recognize how little is actually required for contentment. Peace stops being conditional. It no longer depends on having a perfect day, perfect circumstances, or perfect outcomes. You find steadiness in effort itself, in showing up aligned with your values. This is a profound shift. Most people postpone peace until life improves. The Stoic brings peace into life as it is. At this stage, discipline feels integrated. You are no longer trying to be Stoic. You are simply living with clarity, restraint, and purpose. The morning practice remains, but it is lighter now. Less struggle, more refinement, and yet, there is no arrogance here. You know this stability must be renewed. You know neglect leads to erosion. That is why the morning discipline remains sacred, not as a burden, but as maintenance. This is the seventh truth of morning discipline. When you consistently prepare your mind before the world touches it, calm stops being something you seek and becomes something you carry. A return to the simplicity that started this journey, now deepened by understanding and experience. The Stoics believed that wisdom does not complicate life, it strips it down to what is essential. And the final truth of morning discipline is exactly that. By now, the morning is no longer just a time of day. It is a stance toward life. You wake, not just from sleep, but from unconscious living. You no longer stumble into the day carried by habit, emotion, or expectation. You step into it deliberately. Calm does not mean nothing challenges you. It means nothing owns you. This is where all the threads come together. Discipline, mindset, self-control, awareness, growth. They converge into one quiet realization: you do not need to control the world to live well. You only need to govern yourself. The Stoics never promised happiness as excitement. They promised something stronger, tranquility through alignment. When your actions match your values, the mind rests. When the mind rests, clarity emerges. And from clarity, right action follows naturally. In the morning, you no longer ask for motivation. You no longer negotiate with resistance. You simply begin. This is the highest form of discipline, not force but readiness. The readiness to act well regardless of how you feel. You also stop waiting for permission to live deliberately. You stop postponing growth until conditions improve. You understand that life will always be imperfect, unpredictable, unfinished, and still, this moment is enough to practice virtue. There is humility here. You accept that tomorrow you will wake up again with a mind that needs guidance. You accept that discipline is not a destination but a daily renewal. This does not exhaust you, it steadies you. Because the work is familiar now, honest, grounded. When setbacks come, and they will, you no longer interpret them as signs of failure. You see them as reminders, invitations to return to what you know works, to the morning, to clarity, to restraint, to purpose. You also begin to influence others without trying, not through speeches but through presence, through reliability, through calm under pressure. The Stoics believed that the best argument for philosophy was a life well lived. Your discipline becomes visible in how you speak, how you listen, how you endure. And perhaps the most important transformation of all, you stop fearing time. You are no longer racing against it or trying to escape it. Each morning is not a countdown but a renewal. Another chance to live according to reason and character. This is what it means to rewire the mind, not by changing who you are, but by removing what distorts you, by clearing noise, by choosing deliberately, by practicing daily. So the story does not end here. Tomorrow morning it begins again, quietly, simply, with you waking up, taking ownership of your mind, and choosing once more to live awake. This is the final truth of morning discipline. When you master how you begin, you no longer fear how things unfold.